Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and viewers. If you are watching us on our YouTube channel, I am your political host, Will Wright, and I'm joined by your faithful host, Josh Bertram. How's it going, Josh?
Hey, doing well. How are you, Will?
Excellent. And this week we are joined by a very, very long overdue interview with one Brandi Buchman, who works for the Daily Kos. Kos? Is it Kos? Yeah. Kos. Okay. She's a senior staff writer covering a variety of different things happening in the D.C. area, the least of which being the Oath Keepers, which is what we're going to be concentrating on. And then before that, she was the chief White House and congressional correspondent for Courthouse News. And we are really, really thankful to have you here today, Brandi.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, you know, and just a quick programming note. I have a public apology to pass along to you, not from me, but from one of your old coworkers. I believe he was also a former guest here, Adam Klasfeld.
Yeah.
He wanted to apologize for his disrespect because he didn't address you as senator when he saw you at the Oath Keepers trial.
No, that's true. That's true. I just now realized that's right. So apology accepted. When we covered the impeachments together.
Yeah. Well, what's the story there? So Senator.
The long and short of it is. When we worked at Courthouse News together, we did cover the impeachment there, the first impeachment of Donald Trump. And it was myself and a few other reporters, including a good friend of mine, Jack Rogers. And it was a very many long days and long nights. And there was a lot of order that had to be kept. And we had to make sure that everybody was on track. And so there was a lot of motions that were called in the press room. And so I think that I sort of took on the role of the senator for one reason or another. And that's how that sort of played out while we were all working together during that very crazy time.
Awesome. Well, cool. I will make sure I pass along the news to him. I'm sure he'll be thrilled. So you have been covering the Oath Keepers trial for the past several, I'm sure it probably seems like years.
Yes, 29 days, 29-day long trial. So.
Yeah, so maybe kind of at the high level, 30,000-foot view, and then we will kind of dig down a little bit more into the weeds. Tell us a little bit about what this trial was, and why it came to be.
So the Oath Keepers Seditious conspiracy trial is I think, the highest and most significant and serious charge that the Justice Department brought against any individuals involved with the conduct on January 6th and what happened at the Capitol. And these folks, the Oath Keepers, are sort of iconic when we talk about January 6th because these were the folks that were marching up in stack formations with their hand resting on another person's shoulder, going up in like a line into the Capitol when they got inside. These were a lot of the same folks that we saw that were wearing, a lot of tactical gear on January 6th. And so the founder of this group, the Oath Keepers, went on trial for seditious conspiracy because the government argued, after amassing all of this evidence against him and 9 other members of his organization, that they had plotted to forcibly stop the transfer of power on January 6th, but not just on January 6th. The conspiracy existed before then, in November and December, and it even extended beyond the 6th and went through until was plotted anyway, up until the inauguration of President Biden. So that was sort of what the, charges were about. And so this was a 2-month-long trial where there was a lot of evidence rolled out for the jurors to consider. And they did find the leader, Stewart Rhodes, guilty of seditious conspiracy as well as on other charges. And the only other person in this group of defendants that they did find guilty of seditious conspiracy was the Florida Oath Keeper leader. His name was Kelly Meggs.
Gotcha, man. That's amazing. Like you don't often hear about trials of seditious conspiracy.
You really don't.
Pretty amazing that we're hearing about it and talking about it. So just to get real basic, what are the Oath Keepers, and why should we be concerned about them or care about what they think or what's going on? Obviously, you gave a little taste there, but who are they, and what should we think?
Sure. So the Oath Keepers were founded back in 2009. It was about a year after Barack Obama was president. And this was a lot of reaction that came from the far right at this time that sort of built up around this patriot movement, the Tea Party movement, things of this nature. And so Rhodes founded the Oath Keepers in 2009 and actually launched it on April 19th, and he did it in Lexington, Massachusetts, where the first shot in the American Revolution was fired. And his whole argument was, we should have this group of law enforcement, ex-law enforcement, military folks, veterans, people who are of this part of our country come together and make sure that the laws of the Constitution are being upheld. And where they are not, we essentially go in and uphold them. And that's a very, that's the operative word, uphold,
Wow.
How it's defined. And over the years, the long and short of it with this organization is, they've been involved in a lot of situations where you have folks who think that state laws trump federal laws and that federal laws don't have to be respected, like what we had with the Bundy Ranch a few years back with Eamon Bundy. Rhodes was involved with that. These are folks who showed up during the racial justice protests, after Breonna Taylor was killed, after George Floyd was killed, after Michael Ferguson was killed, or Michael Brown, in Ferguson was killed. They show up to protect, quote unquote, businesses and to, assess whatever they think needs to be enforced in terms of law enforcement. So what we're talking about is folks who support the idea of paramilitaries. They support the ideas of militias. And so this was a key issue at this trial because it was really about, can the jury be convinced that their defense is viable, that these are just people who thought that the Constitution was violated because Trump was not properly reelected, that the COVID-19 protocols were unfair, unconstitutional, and therefore they had the right to say that the election was fraudulent. We can get into the details later, but the Oath Keepers themselves are a far-right organization that believe in a lot of conspiracy theory, and they believe in the Second Amendment very much, and I think that sort of trumps everything else in their worldview for a lot, and we heard a lot about that at the trial too.
Yeah, that's crazy, and I'm wondering, so how many? I think earlier you had alluded that there were 10 people that were charged. But
with Rhodes,
go ahead.
Yeah, so with the Rhodes case, there are 9 defendants. This first trial, we had 5 of those defendants go on, and the next batch had to be split off simply because the federal courthouse could not accommodate all of the defendants, all of the attorneys, everybody's paralegals, all the press and all of this. We held this last trial in a ceremonial courtroom in the courthouse. And so these other folks, the 4 that are left, they're actually going on trial next week. And so they are also facing charges of seditious conspiracy. And a lot of these guys that are going on trial next week were some of the folks who were more closely involved with what the Oath Keepers called a QRF, or a quick reaction force, that was set up on January 6th. And this was something that, prosecutors said that the Oath Keepers set up massive arsenals full of weapons at hotels in various locations in Northern Virginia, just across the Potomac River, about 10-15 minutes from the Capitol, in order to basically take up arms if they needed to take up arms if Trump invoked the Insurrection Act on January 6th, which is part of what Rhodes wanted him to do, but he ultimately never did. So, there's a lot of moving pieces with this here, but yeah, this is going to weigh very heavily, I think, on this next batch of Oath Keepers that are going to trial next week here at the courthouse.
Yeah, and the seditious conspiracy was only Well, I mean, it was probably the most severe, but like,
Mm-hmm.
what were some of the other charges?
Yeah, so they all faced multiple charges. There was also conspiracy to obstruct a proceeding, obstruction of the actual proceeding itself being the certification of the vote. They were also facing charges like conspiracy to prevent officials from discharging their duties, destruction of property. One of the defendants, Jessica Watkins, was facing a felony civil disorder charge, which she admitted to on the stand during the trial, because there was just so much incredibly stark evidence of her on video camera, audio of her talking, where she is resisting police and she's saying, push, 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 get in there, get in there. They can't hold us. So, there was multiple charges that they faced, and then there was also tampering charges because several of our defendants here, as the prosecutor showed the jury, had deleted evidence of text messages or tried to sort of cover their tracks after they caught wind of certain people being written about in the press, like Jessica Watkins and another oath keeper named Donovan Crowell.
Wow. It's amazing how many people it takes to do something like this, and the amount of people that have to be unified in what they think. And I don't know much about Stewart Rhodes, very little, but it's amazing to me that he got this following. I mean, what can you tell us about Stewart Rhodes besides the fact that he's an aspiring pirate? What else is what's going on with him? How can a guy like him get this kind of following?
Well, I think that one of the things that happens with somebody like Rhodes, and one of the things I keep running into when I'm reading what folks are saying about him or about the trial, there's this misconception, I think, for some people that they think that he's just this lazy, kind of maybe even stupid man. He's not. He's not. His actions might have ended up being very stupid, but he is charismatic. He is very intelligent. He is very well read. He is learned. And he has that ability that a lot of narcissists have, which is to be very convincing. And, it was brought up during the trial by another reporter that I worked with. His name was Roger Parloff. He works over at Lawfare. That it sort of struck him when Rhodes was testifying that he sounded like the kind of guy who was being a blowhard trying to pick up a 17-year-old girl at a bar. It's like, if you don't know enough when he's talking to you, it's very easy to see where you could be taken in by whatever his presentation of history is, or politics is, or religion, or rights, or whatever. And he's completely unrepentant in those positions, and he's very arrogant. His testimony when he was on the stand was sort of breathtaking to watch because he was a lot quicker than I thought even I gave him credit for before really hearing him go through these questions. But, I think that he's just really tapped into a populism for people. He found it at a very good time when there was a lot of sort of far-right rhetoric that was rising in the country back in 08, 09. And he sort of rode that wave as far as he could. And he found his tribe in people who feel like there's a, global cabal and conspiracy that's going on that's trying to replace, I think, white people, I think Christian people. They have this very extreme view, and unfortunately, that view is very popular in our country and growing right now. So I think that's, sort of where it came from for him. But when you also sort of tie it into his obsession with the Second Amendment, and there's a lot of people who feel very strongly about that, and that's perfectly all well and good and fine. But, there's a lot of conspiratorial thinking, I think, that goes on with a lot of folks. And I think that he just tapped into a vein for that.
And he went to Yale, didn't he?
He did, yeah. He's a Yale Law School graduate. Before that, he went to the University of Nevada. He was a U.S. Army paratrooper. He was discharged after 3 years in the service. His family, he's estranged from his wife. He's estranged from his children. And to hear them tell it, he was an extremely abusive person. They had made a lot of allegations of domestic abuse, and, had a lot of issues with him over the years. And I've talked to his estranged wife, Tasha Adams, a few times, and I'll tell you, when I asked her before he had testified, how do you think he's going to take these questions? Because we know that under direct examination from his own side, it's going to be no sweat, no problem. But once it starts to get with prosecutors crossing him and they start to needle at him, how do you think he's going to respond? And she told me that, exactly how he behaved was how she described it, was that he would become increasingly pompous and he would, retain his cool, and he would somehow figure out a way to make it about himself, to brag about himself. And that was exactly what he did. I mean, it was really something to behold. I think that even now I question, after his sentencing, if he's sitting right now and wondering how he's going to make himself a pariah out of this. How is he going to play this to his benefit? Because it seems to be that in his personal career and his personal history, it's all about Elmer first, not really about anybody else.
Yeah, that's right, because his first name is Elmer, right?
That's right. Yes, that's right.
And I don't know if I read it from you or somewhere, but was there a point in the trial where he says, like, the reason he goes by Stewart is because his first name's Elmer?
Yeah, he's not a big fan of that. It was really funny to watch him get very upset when he would see pictures of himself. Anytime he would see video or images of himself played for jurors, he would always comment on his appearance. Every time. So, pretty funny.
That's so crazy. Was the length of the trial sort of a byproduct of the number of defendants, or was it just a very complex?
I think that there was a couple of things that were happening with this. The sheer volume of evidence. This was a 2-year-long investigation. Essentially, this was a really intense process running up to the actual trial itself. And there was so much information that authorities had seized from these text messages between the defendants. There was a lot of very high production value evidence that was showed to jurors in terms of video footage that made it very clear to them what they were watching, when it was happening. There was, literally terabytes of data of these conversations and these signal chats among oath keepers and others as they were moving toward the 6th. And a lot of this language was, really very damaging for them. But it was that, and I think that it was just the number of defendants as well. And we also had Jessica Watkins, who decided to testify rather abruptly. She was not expected to testify. And I don't think that was something necessarily that her attorney may have wanted her to do. But in the end, that sort of dragged it out as well, having her come up because she testified, I want to say, for 2 or 3 days. Thomas Caldwell testified on his own behalf, and his wife testified on his behalf. That was another part of this. There were dozens of witnesses that came up. We had days where, questioning would go on for 1 to 2 days for a single witness, So very lengthy trial, very intense trial.
Yeah. Now, I noticed. So during the January 6th hearings, I kept thinking to myself, like, rule number 1 of trying to overthrow the government: don't hire a documentarian to follow you around. Right. So, like, did the Oath Keepers have such a documentarian with them?
It's an interesting question, because in terms of, did they have a documentarian following them around? Yeah, they did. They had somebody that was filming them, and this was not something that really came up at the trial, but they did have a documentarian filming them in the days up to January 6th. We might recall some of that footage that we've seen of Rhodes and the Proud Boys leader, Henry Tarrio, in an underground garage in D.C. on the eve of the insurrection meeting. I mean, this was something that they chose to do themselves. And during the committee hearings, we saw Nick Quested come up and testify about that. But at this particular trial, this was really about their own words. I mean, this is something that I think about all the time as a person who covers courts for the last 7 years now, is anything that you think you can hide from a federal prosecutor, chances are you can't. So just don't say it. Just don't say it in a text if you can avoid it. And one of the defendants in this matter, Kenneth Harrelson, there was nothing really of his that came up at trial because he didn't text. There was not a lot of communication. He didn't have a lot of socials. There was very limited conversations and correspondence that we saw from him. And he wisely decided against testifying on his own behalf. And he walked away with, several of these charges not guilty, with at least 3 of these charges not guilty, including sedition, including conspiracy to obstruct, and including destruction of property. So, for him, that was a wise move, I think.
Wow, that's amazing. It's funny because it just reminds me of, there's this movie called Law Abiding Citizen. It's and in it, I won't give away the movie, but essentially there's a conviction that a father who had lost people close to him, was really upset about, and he went to the lawyer, and the lawyer said, it's not about what happened, it's what you can prove happened.
Right.
And I just thought it's so interesting hearing you talk about it, because it's like, man, it makes me think, how does one prove?
Yeah,
that's Trainee Day.
Seditious conspiracy. I mean,
well,
how does one prove that? Because it's not common, right? So how big of a deal is this? How do you prove it? How big of a deal is it?
So this was one of the really interesting questions, and it's really it's funny to me that you brought it up in that context, because this was truly what this was about, I think, for the defense. So the defense largely relied on the argument that there was no explicit plan. No one, all of these texts, all of this stuff where we see Rhodes and others talking about a bloody civil war, where we see them talking about bringing rifles to the Capitol, resisting the results of the election, all of this, no matter how ugly it was, their argument was, well, look, it's just a bunch of old guys, like they would talk in a locker room, quote unquote. That's literally what one of the defendants called it. It's just a bunch of old guys in a barbershop, quote unquote. That's what one of the defendants said. And that's all well and good, because we didn't
where they
really
got that defense from.
Right. Because we didn't have a explicit plan. But here's the thing. The government does not need to prove that you had an explicit plan. All they have to prove in order to have you convicted beyond a reasonable doubt on seditious conspiracy, in this case, to forcibly stop the transfer of power, was that there was a meeting of the minds, that you had a mutual agreement. You didn't have to agree to the terms of the agreement or the means of which you would execute it, but there had to be a meeting of the minds. And so when we look at how the jury ultimately convicted on this, it's so interesting to me, because they convicted Rhodes of seditious conspiracy. They convicted Meigs of seditious conspiracy, because these were the leaders of this particular conspiracy, right? But they did not find Rhodes guilty of conspiracy to obstruct a proceeding, which I thought was just very interesting. So it's, we don't know why the jurors ended up making these particular choices. They didn't take any questions after they rendered their verdict. They have not yet come out and spoken to the press about anything. But I think that when we talk about the sedition, what there was overwhelming evidence was a mutual agreement that they needed to stop the transfer of power, because they thought that Joe Biden was a quote-unquote Chinese communist puppet, and that if he were to come into the White House, it would be the end of their lives as they knew it. And there was a lot of effort that was put into the testimony that was gotten out of witnesses for the prosecution, as well as witnesses for the defense, about these positions. There was a lot of times where we saw them on January 6th thinking that Pence had, quote unquote, betrayed them, and that the Patriots had to do something. The Patriots weren't going to wait anymore, and that this is what they were going to do, is they were going to go into that building and they were going to be heard. And there was a lot of conflicting information at the trial from the defense, because they would claim that, well, we thought that the certification had already happened. And that's why we went inside. And that's why we tried to have our voices heard. But if you thought that the certification already happened, why not celebrate? It's like why choosing to go this way? You have all these folks who you're there to celebrate Trump with. You know that this is your last shot. It didn't make any sense. A lot of their defense as they were testifying, and I think that the jury sort of saw through to that. But in terms of the other defendants, when it came to Ken Harrelson and Jessica Watkins and Thomas Caldwell, in this case, the seditious conspiracy charges didn't stick because there wasn't strong enough evidence to suggest that they were in on any kind of seditious plot. They were just kind of happenstance involved. Caldwell is a very old man with a lot of history of injuries, a veteran disabled individual. And he got all the way up to the top of the inaugural stage. And he was there with his wife. He was about 50 yards or so away from the Lower West Terrace tunnel, which is where some of the worst violence of that day occurred. And his argument was that he could not see into the tunnel. He didn't know that violence was occurring. But he impeded officers nonetheless. He obstructed the certification nonetheless by being a part of that mob. So he was found guilty on obstructing official proceeding. When he found out that his buddies Jessica Watkins and Donovan Crowell and all the rest were being reported about in the media after the insurrection, he went to great efforts to conceal all of this talk on Facebook about January 6th. And he had a lot of talk about January 6th, but and he was found guilty on the tampering charge. So I think the toughest charge was the sedition charge, to be sure, and that was a tricky one. And I was curious many times as we went whether or not the jury would actually convict on that, because I worried about them getting caught up in the idea of it having to be an express plan. But United States laws are written in such a way that they healthily account for the fact that conspirators usually don't write down explicitly what it is that they're going to do when they're going to commit a crime.
Right. That'd be a little bit too obvious.
Right.
So there's a few things, two quick things. My wife got a degree in children's ministry. Yes, there's a degree in children's ministry, and she and one of her classes was puppeteering. And I was imagining her making a Chinese communist puppet. She would have made someone like Biden or not. But, the other thing that I was thinking is, does this set any precedent beyond, is this setting any precedent that was not set before? Have they pushed the envelope on this, referring to the United States government? Totally get why they convicted them, why they charged them, totally understand, think that was the right thing to do. And does the government take any opportunity to expand the definition of this in any way or in the precedent? What do you think that does to future cases along those lines?
I think what this really does is I think it's more about how we think about January 6th and how we think about what happened. And I think the way that this sort of defines what happened that day, because before this conviction on seditious conspiracy, what we all sort of mutually understand about that day, at least, was that a lot of people trespassed, many people assaulted police, many people were in areas that they were not supposed to be in, many people destroyed government property. But what we needed to understand, which was, I think, plain to see for a lot of folks that followed this, even with, relative closeness, was there was an effort by individuals to halt this nation's transfer of power for the first time in centuries. This was an effort by a group of less than a dozen individuals who felt that their will should be more important than the will of everybody else in order to mete out this end, in order, hoping beyond hope that they would be called up. And the thing with Rhodes and the thing with this too is that even he said it in open letters to Trump that he wrote before the 6th, in messages that he tried to surreptitiously pass through to him, we're going to do this with or without you. because the stakes are so high, and we cannot let this, quote unquote, communist regime of Joe Biden come into office. And so I think that when we talk about what does this mean, it means quite a lot, because it lends some definition and some greater understanding to January 6th as a historical event. And I think that it also helps us think about, Donald Trump a little bit more clearly, in his role and his involvement and his incitement. It lends, I think, a lot of credence to calling January 6th what it was, which was an insurrection that for some reason we are still debating 2 years later, despite just a massive amount of evidence to show us, and, despite his impeachment for it. And then it also has, I think, some greater weight outside of that too. We don't get seditious convictions, or sedition convictions rather, often in this country. The last time that this happened was in 1995, and this was for a group of Islamic militants who had targeted New York landmarks, including the World Trade Center, for bombings. And so it's not something that is rolled out very often, but when it is, it's like the United States government is very clearly telling you, this is what is the ultimate line here, and this is what we cannot break. And I think for what happened with this trial, it was very important, because it really does tell us, the system can hold, and that when you try to usurp the will of millions of people by force, we don't allow that here. And that's really important, no matter what part of the political, spectrum you come from.
Yeah. So based on what I know, and your coverage, a lot of the Oath Keepers' actions, planning, what have you, was sort of predicated on Trump invoking the Insurrection Act. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if maybe you can unpack what the Insurrection Act is, and then, like, how would that have helped the Oath Keepers carry out their plan? Right.
So basically, at its core, what the Insurrection Act does, it allows the president to basically deploy the military to allow any kind of assistance of civilian authority, like the police. So the police could go in and they could be assisted by the army if the president wanted them to, right? That's one example of it. But that's not always what it's about. It can be used to respond to riots. It can be used to respond to natural disasters. It can be used in a lot of different ways. But the thing with this particular instance was that it would have allowed Rhodes what he wanted. I should back up. Rhodes said in his open letters to Trump that he wanted him to invoke the Insurrection Act because he wanted to raise the Oath Keepers to his side and any other militia that he might need, so that they could reverse the outcome of the 2020 election, so that they could seize data from digital voting machines that they thought had been rigged. He asked Trump to do this so he could declassify national secrets. And when they asked Rhodes at trial what he wanted him to declassify, Rhodes admitted that he thought Trump could declassify information about a cabal of, pedophiles. It's the same kind of QAnon right-wing conspiracy theory stuff. This was the stuff that Michael Flynn wanted Trump to do, to seize voting machines. This was something that if Trump invoked the Insurrection Act, then the Oath Keepers would have all of the power that they would need to be sanctioned by Trump to come into DC and to do whatever it is that they thought they were going to do. And, this was definitely a cornerstone of their defense, but it was so easily unraveled by the prosecution. And when you hold up a magnifying glass to that, what you see is that it's so thin. And this is something that the government even said before we got into the trial, which was, you're trying to use this as legal cover. And you're not going to be able to come into this trial and argue what the Insurrection Act is as a matter of law. But what you can come in and say is that, we were here because we wanted to be a protection detail. We wanted to protect Trump supporters from Antifa, which is what they said. We wanted to protect Trump VIPs like Roger Stone, like Michael Flynn, like the fellow Ali Alexander who formed the Stop the Steal movement, who organized one of the rallies at the Ellipse that day. That was the kind of stuff that they said, that's why we were there. But, they couldn't really couldn't really defend that ask of Trump, even though, Lord knows, he certainly tried. Because even after the 6th, Rhodes met with somebody who had an indirect tie to Trump, who said he had an indirect tie to Trump. He was a contractor and a veteran who testified at trial. And he met with him kind of covertly. And the guy who he met with, his name was Jason Alpers. Alpers didn't trust Rhodes, and Alpers was nervous about their meeting, and so he secretly recorded it. And so he went to this meeting. It was the day after, or 4 days after, excuse me, the insurrection. And, this fellow, Mr. Alpers, didn't condone what had happened, but Rhodes was still trying to get the message to Trump at this point. You need to invoke the Insurrection Act. You need to stop this from happening, because in Rhodes's mind, and this is exactly what he said, he felt that the Trump family was going to be dragged out of the White House like the Romanovs were in Russia, and that they were going to be murdered in their beds as they slept. I mean, the guy was completely unhinged, But yeah, that's sort of where that all came from.
Yeah, it's so wild because as you were talking, I was thinking this is what happens when like a trust fall goes wrong,
Right? Yeah.
like when like you're hoping that you're going to do something really dangerous,
Right.
and the idea is that you've got people there that are going to catch you, and it doesn't seem like that Rhodes had the confidence or the assurance that Trump was going to do all these things after he did what he was going to do. And I'm curious, like did Rhodes ever have any direct communication with Trump or Trump's team?
Not that we're aware of, not that there was any evidence shown of that. We know that there were encrypted chats that existed where Rhodes was a part of those chats, that Roger Stone was a part of. So we know that there are like lower level folks underneath Trump, or, allies to Trump, that these folks were in contact with. One of the Oath Keepers who pled guilty to seditious conspiracy before the trial even began was a man by the name of Joshua James, and he led the Alabama Oath Keepers division, and he was in charge of protecting Roger Stone on January 5th and on January 6th, and, being a part of his security detail. So we know that there's a lot of overlap. But in terms of, direct connections, no. And it was not really explained very well at trial how this Jason Alpers fellow had this quote-unquote indirect connection to Trump, but he did. I think that for Rhodes, this was something, and this is something I've thought about a lot in the last few days. I feel like this was his trajectory always, was to end up exactly where he ended up, because he kept taking himself down this path. If you start to dig into him and you look at the arc of his life publicly, this was always a war against the government for him. And I think that he just overplayed his cards this time, and he thought that, well, let me just take advantage of this riot happening right now, and let me get myself prepared for this moment I've been waiting for. And even before the trial really got underway that thoroughly, he did a podcast, and he compared himself to Nelson Mandela. And he said, if you want to be willing to do, stand up for what you believe in, you have to be willing to do a 20-year stint in prison. Well, he might very well have his chance to show himself that. So.
That makes a lot of sense. So now what, should we expect? Him to get the electric chair?
No.
Last chamber? No, we don't do that.
No. He's looking
squad,
at a maximum sentence on just the sedition charge alone of about 20 years. So the sentencing is going to be several weeks from now, likely to be a few months from now. And, I imagine because of his conduct at the trial, because of the weight of the evidence against him, and because, he just showed such little remorse while he was testifying, I'm fairly certain as well, because this is a serious charge that we don't bring very often, I think the government is going to ask for the max. I can't imagine that they wouldn't. And I think that the judge might be inclined to give it to him. we'll see how it goes, because he has multiple charges here. So I think he's probably very likely going to do at least 10 years in prison, but I think it's more likely he's going to do at least 20 years in prison.
And it's like, so does like him being, it doesn't feel like this should be right, but him being arrogant, that shouldn't play into the sentencing, or does it? Or can the judge be like, I really don't like you. You're arrogant. I'm giving you 25 years
Right.
or something.
Well, I don't think it's so much that he was arrogant that is what's going to seal his fate here. I think it's that what he effectively admitted to. You know, he lied on the stand a lot. He tripped up over his own testimony a lot.
Wow.
And when you lie on the stand, that doesn't tend to bode well for you. I don't care who you are. And, you know, the thing with Mehta, Judge Amit Mehta, who was presiding in this matter, you know, incredibly fair, a very intelligent judge. And even after the trial was over, you know, the defense attorneys praised him and said that they got a very fair trial and that the government took them to task. And he said, look, we're disappointed with the outcome, but, you know, this was something that we felt we did our best that we could do. And we felt that Mehta was very fair and had worked very hard for the last 2 years to push us all to get to this point. And, you know, James Lee Bright, Rhodes' defense attorney, said, you know, in his 25 years of practicing, Judge Mehta was by far one of the most highly regarded people he's ever practiced in front of, just because of the way that he comported himself, you know. So I think that when it comes to Rhodes made his own bed. The evidence is strong enough against him, and he made a lot of risks when he testified, some of which I don't think were very smart risks.
Yeah. So how was this verdict received? You know, from members of the Rhodes family, and more specifically from, you know, a lot of the Capitol Police that were actually affected by his actions.
Well, you know, Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn, who also testified at the trial. You know, he was, I know, very relieved to see that the verdict came down how it came down. And we talked about it after the fact. And I asked him exactly that, you know, are you celebrating this verdict? Because I know it's been a long time coming. And keep in mind, Oath Keepers also accused Harry Dunn of, you know, some pretty wild things, suggesting that, you know, he essentially allowed the Oath Keepers to help him on January 6th, which is just patently absurd. But, you know, he's been through a lot, and he said, you know, justice is not something that should be celebrated, but it should be expected. But nonetheless, you know, he was happy because he felt like this was a win for his coworkers. This was a win for the American people. This was a win for the, you know, for justice. And it's just been a very long time that we've sort of all been waiting to see how this would pan out. And I know that he was quite relieved. And I've, you know, I've not yet talked to Tasha Adams, Rhodes's estranged wife, since the verdict has come down. But I know in the days running up to it, you know, that was a lot of stress for her. I know that she's been through quite a bit. Rhodes has, I think, terrified her over the course of her life, and she was very concerned about how this would pan out. So I can imagine that there's a lot of relief there for her and for their children. You know, the children have expressed publicly their difficulties with their father and the difficulties that this has caused them. And I think that's one of the saddest things about all of this, is it's like, you know, a lot of people's lives got destroyed. A lot of people are still dealing with the trauma of that day. And it's a very difficult thing when you walk around in a country where the average person just forgot about what happened. And I think that this conviction sort of reminds us why this matters.
Yeah, you know, we had Harry Dunn on this program, I don't know, probably about year ago. I don't know. Like, yeah, he's definitely good people, and I'm glad that he was able to kind of get some closure on this ordeal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what was it like for the people that were really supportive of Rhodes? Was there a backlash? Was there protests? What's going on with that?
You know, the day that he was found guilty, The courthouse was relatively quiet outside. I didn't see a lot of action going on in terms of protest to that. I know that this is something that, for folks who sort of feel like January 6th was an inside job, or that these people are political prisoners because they're still awaiting their trial dates, or whatever their reasoning might be. I know that unfortunately there's just not going to be a meeting of the minds on this. And I'll give you an example. At the start of this trial, when there was jury selection going on, Ashley Babbitt's mother had attended jury selection, and she attends a lot of these cases because she's pretty much taken it upon herself to preach the gospel that she feels is correct about January 6th. And, this is a person who showed up to the jury selection for a seditious conspiracy trial involving what happened that day, wearing a shirt of the Capitol on January 6th while it was being overrun. And literally people were fighting for their lives in a place where her daughter, was shot. And was shot because she tried to climb through a window after she was warned by an officer several times, do not come any further. And that is tragic. Every person who lost their life, that is tragic. It is horrible that all of this happened as it did. But, I think that there's just never going to really be an agreement among some people about what happened that day. And they're always going to see this as, well, this was a hit job from the FBI. And that's what we heard at trial from the defense. So much of the defendant's cases rested on the argument that the FBI, botched their investigation because there were mistakes that were made with information about some of the defendants, not being able to properly identify who was in the chain of command because one of them went by the name Commander. It was like these small things that are not, ultimately small, but, I just think that there's going to be a lot of difficulty around this for a long time. And what can you do?
Yeah. So kind of looking at the future, I know that, that the second trial is going to be starting here soon, next week. So this episode will air on Tuesday. And so it'll be this week if you're keeping track. I'm curious on your thoughts about, what damage the GOP could potentially do with some of these future investigations. I know that Trump, even now is, expressing support for, the January 6th defendants and, and our audience will know that. So I'm sort of the flaming liberal of the group and Josh is the staunch Republican. So I have concerns that I think that the GOP is going to, turn this into another Benghazi or something. So I'm curious on what your thoughts are. What levers can they pull to really make things harder?
I think in terms of what they can do to make things more difficult, look, when I covered the Trump years and I covered Congress during the Trump years, and I saw the Republicans at various times in the majority or the minority positions on the committee level, I anticipate that this is going to be a lot of spectacle, a lot of not getting any work done, a lot of just meaningless committee blather and press junkets and more ways to divide the American people instead of taking any kind of real accountability for our actions or the actions of people who we fervently support. I'm not really of the opinion that many people in the GOP have gotten off the Trump train yet. I know that that's a very popular opinion these days, but I'll reserve my judgment on that. I remember 2015. I remember 2016. I'll wait before I'll say that everybody is totally off that. No one's Ron DeSantis. But, I think that in terms of January 6th, in terms of, all of this, The cat's already out of the bag. The committee is going to be wrapped by the end of this month. They're going to produce a report that is going to contain a huge amount of information. We're going to have, 1,000 depositions to comb over. The, scholars, academics, people who are interested, journalists, anybody, they're going to have access to this for a while. And there are a lot of pieces to this that we're all going to sort of collectively come to understand that maybe perhaps we didn't understand even with the 8 hearings that we got this summer. And as far as what the Justice Department is doing, Merrick Garland's not going anywhere yet. Okay, just because the House comes into power doesn't mean that the House can control what happens at the Justice Department. The House can't do anything. The Senate can't do anything about the fact that these grand juries have been convened. Can't do anything about the indictments that are going to come out. All they're going to be able to do is whine and complain and try to deflect and distract and divide. And people would behoove themselves to pay attention to the folks that are trying to just take them down a path of disinformation and not make the same mistakes that we made 5 years ago.
Yeah, that'll preach. Well, Senator Buchman, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. It's just Brandi, Brandi _Buchman, Buchman. Or you can find me on the Daily Kos, just Kos. I'm also on Mastodon now. So if you search for me, same way like you find me on Twitter, you'll find me on Mastodon as well too. Yeah.
And I've been trying to get on Mastodon. It's way too confusing for me at this point.
It took me some time, but it takes some new learning. It's definitely not as easy as Twitter, that's for sure.
Yeah, come on, Elon. Come on. Get your act together. But
exactly.
Thanks again, Brandi, and to all of our listeners and viewers. Yeah, just make sure you're following Brandi and
yes, thanks, Brandi.
Well, thanks for letting me talk your ear off. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no
Great.
problem. We will see you all next week.
All right.
Take
Have
care.
a good one.
Bye.